Raum. Und wir starten ja auch parallel immer unseren YouTube-Stream und das dauert auch einen Augenblick immer, bis das zeitversetzt gestartet hat. Deswegen hatte ich einen Moment. Okay, jetzt können wir, denke ich, loslegen. Wir haben auch schon 4 nach. Also herzlich willkommen, schön, dass ihr da seid zu unserem Webinar zur Situation in Israel und in Gaza. Wir wollen gerne mit euch heute Abend darüber sprechen, was vor Ort gerade los ist. Ich habe ein paar sehr wichtige technische Hinweise im Vorfeld. Da würde ich um etwas Geduld bitten, dass ich da einmal kurz durchgehe. Einmal vorab, leider ist es uns nicht möglich, aufgrund der technischen Bedingungen dieses Webinar auf oder zu übersetzen. Und deswegen werden wir hier das Webinar komplett auf Englisch machen, obwohl wir das leider anders angekündigt hatten in der Einladung. Das ist uns aber leider nicht möglich, weil Zoom diese Funktion nicht freischaltet. Das heißt, es ist so, dass wir dieses Webinar komplett auf Englisch machen werden. Es wird parallel bei YouTube gestreamt. Auch dort ist es möglich, im Nachgang des Webinars dann die Übersetzungsfunktion anzuzeigen, sodass dann auf YouTube die Übersetzung mit den Untertitelfunktionen eingeschaltet werden kann. Aber auch das ist erst nach Ende des Webinars möglich. Ich möchte mich dafür entschuldigen, dass das jetzt so ist, aber wir wollten unbedingt dieses Webinar zu diesem Zeitpunkt auch durchführen und wollten auch nicht verschieben oder absagen. Und deswegen ist es jetzt so gekommen. Ich hoffe auf euer Verständnis und dass wir da gemeinsam mit dem englischsprachigen heute Abend auch gut durchkommen. Aber wie gesagt, wichtiges Thema. Deswegen ist es uns sehr wichtig gewesen, das auch heute Abend stattfinden zu lassen. Das vorab. Dann gibt es noch einige Hinweise von mir, die sind eigentlich für jedes Webinar. Die kennt ihr bereits. Ihr habt die Gelegenheit, während wir einen kurzen Input hören von unseren Gästen, Fragen zu stellen im Chat. Und wir werden die im Hintergrund sammeln und ihr könnt diese Fragen dann, oder wir werden diese Fragen im Hintergrund sortieren. Und dann habe ich hier so ein kleines Tablet und hier schaue ich deswegen ab und zu mal auf diese Seite, auf dieses Tablet, weil meine Mitarbeitenden die Fragen im Hintergrund sortieren und ich werde die Fragen dann in eurem Namen stellen. Deswegen sagt auch gerne immer, an wen sich die Frage richtet. Dann können wir da sehr gut durchkommen. So, und dann hätte ich noch einen allerletzten Hinweis. Wir werden den Chat auch durchmoderieren. Das heißt, wir werden auch sicherstellen, dass hier keine menschenfeindlichen oder antisemitischen Äußerungen fallen. Das ist, glaube ich, in unser aller Interesse, dass wir hier eine gute eine gute Basis haben, eine gute Gesprächsgrundlage und auch nichts und auch solche Äußerungen hier natürlich nicht gewünscht sind. So, dann würde ich sagen, lasst uns loslegen und ab jetzt rede ich dann auch auf Englisch. So, welcome again. Thank you for joining us, Max, Hamza, and Ofer. Thank you that you are with us with the Greens in NRW. I'm Yazgülü Zeybek, the chair, the co-chair of the Greens here in North Rhine-Westphalia. And we will talk today on the issues and the situation in Israel and in Gaza. This has been a conflict that has been long brewing, but has escalated, of course, with the attack of Hamas on Israel on the 7th of October 2023, and since then has further escalated with the attacks Israel has started on Gaza Strip. And of course, there is a current evolving situation, very changing dynamics, and we have the current escalation with Iran, but we originally invited to this webinar in order to talk about the humanitarian situation in Gaza and about the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. So I would say we will start with that issue, but of course we cannot avoid and we don't want to avoid the discussion on the current escalation with Iran because it all hangs together or it all has to do with one another. And we will then switch to that in a later part of the webinar. So let's start. Like I said, the 7th of October is a very escalating day. It's a very horrible day that has led to the death of many, many people in Israel, people who are celebrating, people who are living on the border, who were just going about their lives. And it still is currently the situation that we have 53 hostages in Gaza under the control of Hamas, most of them dead, but some of them still alive. And we have since then one of the largest offensive actions against Gaza by the Israeli military forces. And we have many civilian deaths in Gaza. We have many displaced people, many people who are fleeing. We have a lot of attacks on civilian infrastructure. And in the last months, especially, a very escalating humanitarian situation in Gaza, in the Strip, because no aid was getting through. So this is the backdrop of the current situation. And I would start, Max, with a small question to you. Max is our speaker for human rights in the Bundestag. And dear Max, please, can you tell us, can you start with a short overview of the last weeks and months on the current situation in Israel and in Gaza, especially with regards to the humanitarian situation?
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Yazgülü, and the staff of Greens NRW for organizing this webinar. And of course, thank you, Hamza and Ofer, for joining our webinar of the Greens in North Rhine-Westphalia. And I think it's very important to speak about the current situation, about the situation on the ground. And as you already said, Yazgülü, there is a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, and there is an existential threat still for Israel. And I think it's very important to, of course, have this overview. And as many know, there are, regarding to numbers from Gaza, there are more than 50,000 deaths in Gaza due to this war. And there is also a situation in Israel where Israel is under attack, of course, by Iran, and in the new situation of this war. And I think an overview must start, of course, with the special view on the German-Israeli relation, but not because the German-Israeli relation is something from the past, but because the German-Israeli relation is something from the present. You know, we have a foreign minister of Germany who talks about things like obligatory debt. But what is an obligatory debt? We should have a relation that is based on values. And I really believe in this relation. I believe that there is a German-Israeli relation because we are both democracies, we share values, but that is why we also have to discuss on the base of values. And if we discuss on the base of values, we have to face that the far-right government of Benjamin Netanyahu is a strain on the German-Israeli alliance, because what we see in Gaza is that this government does not share the values for which large parts of Israeli society stand in protest. It does not respect international humanitarian law or human rights, which are values we must defend. And it does not, and that is really a thing that really makes me cry. It does not make the release of the 58 hostages, including 6 German citizens, a priority. Instead, it deepened the conflict in Gaza, continues the illegitimate settlement construction in the West Bank, and some ministers even support radical settlers in their acts of violence. And I think it is really, really crucial for us to, of course, create pressure on Hamas and of everyone who is in a relation with Hamas and of everyone who has an access to Hamas. But it is also our responsibility to take a close look at this and to take a close look to the actions of the Israeli government, which are not part of a good German-Israeli relation, because the German-Israeli relation should be based, and it still is based, if you look to the Israeli civil society, on values. So I believe that we have to increase our political pressure towards the government of Benjamin Netanyahu. And I was very grateful to the Foreign Minister Waterful for stating on May 13th that he intends to increase pressure on the Israeli government by reviewing arms deliveries to Israel. And I cannot understand that he was attacked for this by the CSU parliamentary group leader, by someone from his own party or by his sister party. And I think that this is really a threat to German foreign policy, that Chancellor Merz on the one side promised us a unified German foreign policy voice, but in the face of hostages being held in Gaza, in the face of the threat to Israel's existence, and light of this unbearable humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, we see two foreign policy voices from Germany. One foreign policy voice from the CDU and one foreign policy voice from the CSU. And I think that there is no contradiction between fighting for Israel's existence and demanding an end to this terrible war in Gaza. And I really believe by heart that these are the both things we have to advocate for. And I believe that the people in Gaza, in the West Bank, and in Israel, they really deserve a future in peace and freedom, and they deserve not German debate culture, which seems to be a football game. And that is a thing I really see too often in parliament, but also on the streets, that people start to use this situation for their political agenda, but not to solve this situation and not to stop this humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. And I think that a crucial thing to stop this humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, a crucial thing to create a safe arrangement for Israel also with our foreign policy approach, which is indeed a human rights question still. And I believe that also bringing a better situation for Iran, and especially for the civil society of Iran, which suffers regarding to this war, but which suffers also, of course, regarding to this terrible Mullah regime, that these are things we have to bring together. And I really believe that one part of the solution is to listen to voices who try to build bridges, not burn them, and who break out of the gridlock and of the black and white. And that is why I'm so thankful for our guests on this evening tonight.
Thank you, Max, for this short overview or introduction to our topic tonight. Hamza, let's continue with you. You are a Palestinian activist, and Hamas, or you criticize Hamas here in Germany, but you also did in Palestine, and you fled to Germany in August 2023, I think. And since then, you have also been organizing protests against Hamas and the situation in Gaza, of course, or their hold on Gaza, let's say it like that. The main reason that Israel has said it attacks Gaza is that it says Hamas is everywhere, and that they have to stop Hamas militarily. Which of course is understandable regarding the history, but also regarding the existential threat that is coming from Hamas, which has not only since the 7th of October, but especially with the events on the 7th of October, with that terrorist attack, made clear that they view Israel as a state that they want to eradicate and act as a threat to Jewish life. So since then, since the 7th of October, the situation, of course, has been not only felt by Hamas, but also by many people, civilian life in Gaza. So my question to you is, how strong is actually the support for Hamas in the Gaza Strip? How strong is Hamas in the life of the people who live there? And is there actually resistance among the Palestinians against Hamas and against their rule and against the terrorist regime that they perpetrate? And how are Palestinians actually protesting against this Hamas cause?
Actually, thanks for inviting me to be here. It's always good to be with you, and thank you for the introduction. But just one thing for the introduction, because I like to be introduced as a human rights and peace activist, because I'm critical of Hamas, but on the other hand, I'm also critical of the policies of the Israeli government, the acts of the Israeli army, the violence by the settlers in the West Bank against the Palestinian communities. Actually, if the question was before October the 7th, yes, there was a major support for Hamas that cannot even be discussed. There was a minority or a group that has started to be anti-Hamas movement, but it wasn't big enough to topple Hamas or to get rid of them, not to mention that this movement was empty-handed fighting a militia. But right now, there is many polls that were conducted during the war about Hamas's popularity among the Gazans, and I think the most respected poll was by the Palestinian Center for Policy and Research Survey, which said that 35% of the Gazan society wants to see Hamas in Gaza's future, and other polls like the Our poll suggested only 20%, and I like to think that the Our poll is more accurate than the PCPRS one, because from what we are hearing from the people in Gaza, there is literally no support in among the society right now for Hamas's ideology as a movement, as a militia. The Hamas crossed all the red lines with the Gaza society, not to mention what they also did to the Israeli civilians on October the 7th. Nonetheless, there is still a minority who are beneficiary of Hamas's acts, and they are also interested in keeping Hamas in power because it's also beneficial to them. But I would say that this minority does not exceed 25% among the Gaza society. And the good thing is that we are also seeing an extraordinary bravery actually by the Gazan society to have the risk and to protest against Hamas during the war, during the bombardment. I mean, I'm talking about war that touched almost every family in Gaza. I'm talking about more than 2,200 Palestinian families were just wiped out. No one survived from those families. I'm talking about more than 5,000 families have only one survivor. And I have no idea how this survivor is gonna make it. Every family was affected by this war and lost someone by this war. And it wasn't actually Hamas. It was mostly the Israeli airstrikes who killed them. So we should also understand that those people are willing to risk that they are protesting under a bombardment. They are desperate for food, for water, for everything, living in a tent for more than 1 year. Still, they have the bravery, they have the willingness to protest against Hamas and to say it explicitly, keeping in mind all the risks that come when you protest against Hamas. When you protest against Hamas, you just say that I'm willing to risk that those militias might just kidnap me, torture me, kill me. And even if they couldn't, they would reach out to the protesters' family. They might threaten them, as happened with the mayor of Beit Lahia, who died of a heart attack after he received the news that his wife was threatened by Hamas. It also happened with Uday Nasser al-Rabai, who was tortured to death simply because he participated and was calling for anti-Hamas protest. Still, the situation in Gaza is not only about the anti-Hamas movement. There is also, as Max presented, a humanitarian catastrophe happening in Gaza right now. I mean, just yesterday, more than 111 people were massacred. 60 to 70 people from those people were just killed while going to receive some of the humanitarian aid, or the so-called humanitarian aid. Each 1 or 2 days, we are hearing about a massacre while people were heading to receive aid. The best case scenario is that you might go back to your family with a bag of flour, or maybe just empty-handed, but safe, which is like something valuable right now in Gaza. And just today, more than 11 people were killed in one of the American-Israeli company aid distribution points in Rafah. So unfortunately, this is being normalized. This is happening every day, and the fact that it's happening every day is making, unfortunately, people getting normalized to hear such a news. We are talking about an act by the Israeli government since March the 2nd, and they do not allow the humanitarian aid trucks to enter regularly in the Gaza Strip. The food is unfortunately being used as a weapon of war, that is unfortunately collectively punishing the Gazan society for Hamas's actions.
Thank you, Hamza, for your very effective words. And we will continue with Ofer Waldman. Let me first introduce you. You are the designated new president or chair or the director of the Tel Aviv office of the Heinrich-Böll Foundation. And you will start, I think, in July. Is that right?
Yeah, in a month's time. Yeah.
Are you already in Israel, or are you still in Berlin?
No, I am already in Israel. Yeah.
Okay. So let's start with a question to you. I by the way, I hope you are safe at the moment. I think also there are some attacks in Tel Aviv happening currently. So first of all, I hope you are safe and you will keep safe. But my question to you, Ofer, is that the Netanyahu government is a right-wing government. It's an extreme government in their policies, not just with regards to Gaza and Hamas, but in general, but especially in the war since the 7th of October, and has escalated the situation dramatically. And the question to you would be that many people in Israel are against the war. We see some protests organized by civilian groups or by civil society organizations that protest against the Netanyahu government and against their course, and are calling for peace. And of course, calling for the return of the hostages and a ceasefire, but they demand of the government that the attacks on Gaza and the humanitarian situation or the suffering of the Palestinian people must stop. How is this actually affecting Israeli politics at the moment, and how is this dividing the Israeli society as a whole?
So first of all, Yazgülü, Max, and Hamza, thank you very much for having me tonight. It is always a pleasure to talk with activists from Germany, and I think this is one of the most important things that we see, that the people living here, and I believe Hamza would agree with me, that it is so important to see what is going on in the country itself, in the Palestinian territories, and in Gaza. And I would also like to add to what Max just said, that I absolutely agree. I think that solidarity with Israel and compliance with the international law are no contradictions. Actually, I think they go hand by hand, and I think that the future of Israel and also the future of the Israeli democracy lies in this overlap between being expressing solidarity with Israel and complying with international law. In this overlap, we find the brave activists of the Israeli civil society you, Yazgülü, just talked about, protesting against the war. There lies the future of Israel, and there lies the future of the German-Israeli relationship. Now, to your question regarding the current situation, so I would definitely indeed divide between the war in Iran, or the war between Israel and Iran, and the war in Gaza. So first of all, if we look on the goals of the war of Israel in Gaza following the horrors of October 7th, the goals that the Israeli government expressed were destroying Hamas and freeing the hostages, although one must add that in the past few weeks we hear that these two goals don't enjoy the same priority, that destroying Hamas enjoys a higher priority in the eyes of the Israeli government than liberating the over 50 hostages, around 20 of them still alive. And as you also said, we have right extreme forces within the Israeli government openly talking about resettling the Gaza Strip, openly talking about deepening the Israeli occupation. In the West Bank, we see an increase in settler violence in the West Bank. We see, in a way, I would say, a Gazaization of the West Bank, meaning that the practices that we see conducted by the Israeli army in the Gaza Strip already being practiced in the West Bank, in the military operation in the West Bank. Now, talking about Benjamin Netanyahu, Benjamin Netanyahu's future, in a way, is dependent on the war in Gaza. And why is that? We know that Netanyahu is being accused in 3 cases of corruption in front of the Israeli system of justice. And we know that, we see that for him, he knows that as long as his coalition remains intact, he's more or less safe from the repercussions of this process. And in order to keep his coalition intact, and again, as I said, parts of this coalition want to resettle Gaza, want to intensify the pressure on the Palestinian civil society and the civil population. This is one of the reasons we see these extreme measures. But as you asked about the popular stance in Israel towards this war, we definitely see, and this is I would say the major difference from this war and the war Israel conducts now against Iran. We see an erosion of the support. We see soldiers who have been to the Gaza Strip, who have seen what Israel is doing there, questioning their duty in Gaza, questioning what Israel is doing there. And we do see a growing realization of the human catastrophe. Max already referred to it, Hamza as well. Over 50,000 casualties, most of them civilian casualties. We're talking about hunger, we talk about diseases, we talk about unbearable images that we see from the Gaza Strip. And these images slowly but surely reach the Israeli population. So, and there are those exactly brave activists of the Israeli civil society who try to, for instance, show pictures of the civilian casualties in Gaza during demonstrations in Israel. And as you asked about the division within Israeli society, maybe to put all of this in context, we should remember that when Israel entered the war on October 7th in 2023, Israel was already, after 10 months of mass demonstrations against the so-called judicial overhaul or judicial reform, the attempt to weaken Israeli democracy by the current government. And we see in the shadow of this current war, we see a relaunch, so to speak, of this judicial overhaul, of this reform. We see a growing pressure on Israeli civil society. Maybe some of you have heard of the new NGO taxation law, which aims exactly on those NGO who try to protest against the war, aiming at those NGOs who help us, they are our eyes and ears. They tell us what is going on the ground in the West Bank, in Gaza Strip, in Eastern Jerusalem. These NGOs are now under pressure by the Israeli government. So as we see this judicial overhaul relaunched, as we see the critical voices coming from soldiers serving in the Gaza Strip, refusing to go back there, I would definitely say that the division within Israeli society regarding the Gaza war, again, we'll talk later about Iran, regarding the Gaza war runs deep.
We already have some questions in the chat. I want to remind you, all the audience, you are of course allowed to ask the questions in German. We will translate them into English if you need to, and of course we are obviously allowed to ask them in English as well. But just to make sure that you know this. Let's start with a question on the distribution centers. There is actually a comment in the chat that I do not agree with in the way it's asked or it's framed, but I want to ask it as a question because it's already been a topic in the past few weeks, especially when the Israeli government allowed some distribution centers to start distributing aid again. There were some attacks in the close proximity or some deaths to civilians in the close proximity to these distribution centers. So my question would be, how is the distribution centers? How is the situation there? Is it safe to go there? Is it organized again by international organizations, or is it strongly controlled and protected by the Israeli military forces? Does anyone of you know anything about this, or can you answer this question? Hamza, maybe you?
Yeah, so I will answer from what I heard from the people in Gaza. I mean, when it comes to this New Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, there was many reports about the drawbacks for this company from the people in Gaza. I mean, one of or the most disturbing one was that is a logistical failure actually by this company, because it only has I think 4 to 5 aid distribution points, and those aid distribution points are located in the extreme south of the southern Gaza Strip. And the people in the north or in central Gaza, if they wanted to receive some of this aid, they have to make it on feet to the southern Gaza Strip, and this might take 4 to 5 hours. And keep in mind that during these 4 or 5 hours, the Israeli airstrikes and the suffering does not stop for them. And there was also other reports about the humiliation and mistreatment of the American soldiers or the American employees of this company. There was many documented cases of humiliation and bad treatment to those who are supposed to receive aid, not to mention that unfortunately there was many cases of people going to these aid distribution centers then to happen a clash or whatever between this company and some of the militias in the Strip, which almost always ends up with dozens of civilians being killed. Not to mention also other reports by some Gazans who reported that after they went with whatever they received from this aid, they were actually stopped by some gangs in Gaza that took the humanitarian aid from them. And the reason that is giving those gangs this possibility to steal people in the middle of the street is first the lack of law enforcement power, which unfortunately Israel is making sure that it does not happen in Gaza. And you can imagine when there is no law enforcement power, what happens in the Strip. You can do whatever a crime and just get out with it. This is one thing. The other thing is that those people have to walk for between 4 to 5 hours. So this is giving more time for those gangs to steal those people, to rob them from whatever they receive. In other cases, some people actually made it to these points and waited for those 4 or 5 hours, and they went back home, unfortunately, without any aid. They just went and couldn't receive anything because, unfortunately, what happens in these aid distribution centers is just a matter of chaos. And what the people, and I'm quoting one of them, it was actually documented by Reuters. He said, "Whoever runs the fastest or whoever pushes the hardest is the one who receives the aid."
Thank you, Hamza. We have some questions to Max, I think would be fitting about the response from the EU and from Germany especially. And I would start with a question from Christiane. She asks, what about supporting the EU proposal not to import goods from settlements, acknowledge Palestine as a state like 146 countries did, and Macron proposed, restart supporting NGOs which support human rights of Palestinians. Do you know anything about this proposal at the EU level and our stance to it?
Thank you for this question. And I think that the reason you asked this question is a very important reason, because I think that we have to create real pressure on the Israeli government, and especially also we have to create pressure regarding the illegal settlement construction in the West Bank. And you ask if recognizing a Palestinian state is creating pressure on this government, and it maybe is. But first of all, let me say, when I see that ministers like Ben-Gvir have distributed weapons in small bags to radical settlers, I have to say, of course, one possible measure against this government is to restrict, curtail arm exports. And I will always oppose withholding resources from Israelis' air defense. But those small arms that Ben-Gvir is sending out to radical settlers, we restricted that while in government, and I expect the new government to do the same. And I really believe that we have to force our German government, and I really believe that we have to force European governments to restrict specific weapons and especially small arms to the Israeli government. Now, to your proposals, I think that restricting products that are linked to the illegal settlements is a reasonable idea. And of course, there should be a Palestinian state. But as long as the international community does not present a credible path forward and develop it together with Israel that shows how Palestinians can gain a future with dignity, freedom, and without Hamas terror, then recognizing Palestine is as a state, for me, is a symbolic act, and as you said, without real impact. I think that doesn't mean that we should not do it, but I think recognizing a Palestinian state on its own will not only solve the situation. And moreover, the Oslo Accords mean that both parties must come to a mutual agreement. And so I really advocate for a credible path forward, for a two-state solutions, which must ultimately include the establishment of a democratic Palestinian state. And at the same time, we really must vigorously support Israeli peace initiatives. These efforts by Israelis who are working towards reconciliation and coexistence are crucial to building trust and creating the political conditions necessary for lasting peace. Strengthening these initiatives is not only morally important, but also strategically essential for the future stability of the region. And this also creates pressure on the Israeli government. Creating pressure on the Israeli government does not only mean to isolate Israel and does not mean to do not care about the interests of the Israeli civil society. Instead, it means to strengthen the Israeli society, the civil society, the peacemakers of Israel, to make their voices heard, to support their work they do on the ground. And that is why I also think that I disagree to what I think Carl wrote in the chat, because of course we have to be critical on many things regarding the German approach towards Israel over the last years. But Israel is not just an evil an entity we have to fight at. Israel is a state including a big and a huge civil society we have to strengthen. At the same time, we have, of course, to strengthen a Palestinian civil society and to support their work, because Palestine is also not Hamas. And that is why I think we should not try to point out fingers and to blame each other, and instead really finding a solution that really solves the problems on the ground for the people and that provides a pathway to dignity and freedom for everyone, Israel and Gaza and in the West Bank. And that, of course, includes a Palestinian state. And that is why the goal of our foreign policy approach also has to be a Palestinian state, but a Palestinian state that will exist as a democracy alongside Israel. That has to be our goal.
Hamza, do you want to add to this? Yeah.
Yes, actually, thanks to Max for reminding me, because of the humanitarian emergency in Gaza, I forgot to reflect also on the West Bank, because right now we are talking about a total closure by the Israeli military to the West Bank for 6 consecutive days. I mean, we are talking about a total closure for the cities, for the towns, for the roads, even for the roads to schools, roads. Sometimes there was documented cases by the Palestinian Red Cross for even preventing ambulances from reaching some certain areas. And this complete closure in the West Bank is really affecting the people's lives. We are talking about a big closure in the markets of Ramallah, which is can be considered the commercial capital of the Palestinian territories. And this is affecting the entire civil society in the West Bank that is on the edge of collapse, because also the Israeli government is withholding the money, the tax money that is supposed to go to the Palestinian Authority since October the 7th. So we are talking about employees who are not getting paid. The state's employees, the normal employees, the state is not functioning well. And since we also spoke about the possibility of a Palestinian state, it was also unfortunate what happened recently with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas with French President Macron, when they tried to come with a proposal for a Palestinian state that actually included disarming Hamas and having a democratic state. They went with the negotiation, they went with the diplomacy circle, but how the Israeli government responded, they responded with approving a new 22 illegal settlements in the West Bank. This is coming beside the already 700,000 illegal Israeli settlers who are living in the West Bank. And unfortunately, they are standing as an obstacle for a two-state solution and making it harder and harder. And this is not to mention the violence that comes from some circles of these settlers. I mean, we are talking in 2024 alone, there was more than 1,400 documented cases of violence by Israeli settlers against the Palestinian communities, and we rarely hear about an accountability or holding these violent settlers accountable for the crimes they are committing.
Ofer.
I would like to add, when we talk about international law, we talk not only about international law, but international humanitarian law. We talk about the humanitarian aid in Gaza, and indeed, like Hamza said, that most of it is being distributed in the southern part of the Gaza Strip. By this also using the humanitarian aid in order to force or encourage population movements within the within the Gaza Strip, which is forbidden under international humanitarian law. And we see that, for instance, the World Central Kitchen, one of the largest NGOs active in Gaza, facing large difficulties, although they had the infrastructure to work in the Gaza Strip. As we see now, the efforts to distribute the humanitarian aid over the new Gaza fund created by the United States and Israel. So indeed, this usage of humanitarian aid to achieve political goals is under the humanitarian international law forbidden. And I think there is one aspect that we should consider when we talk about acknowledging a Palestinian state. And Max mentioned the Oslo Accords from the 90s. There are two tracks that we have to keep in mind. Of course, we have to talk about a Palestinian state. This is a clear goal, not only of the Federal Republic of Germany, but of the European Union and the so-called quartet of international forces trying to solve the Middle Eastern conflict and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But while we talk about Palestinian sovereignty, while we talk about the Palestinian state, we should not neglect the discussion about not civil rights, but human rights. And when we talk about what is going on in the West Bank these days, for instance, in the southern part of the Hebron mountains, south of Hebron, in Masaf Aryata and other areas, and I'm sure that my colleague from the Ramallah office of the Heinrich-Böll Foundation can say a lot about it. They follow the situation closely. So we don't only talk about Palestinian statehood, because in the past 30, 40 years, because we concentrated so much on creating Palestinian statehood, which is a goal in its own, we sometimes neglected the people on the ground, the question of human rights, of the villagers, of the farmers, of the shepherds in the Bik'ah, in the Jordan Valley area. So when we talk about Palestinian statehood, which is an important topic, we should not neglect not only top down but also bottom up. What is going on with the people on the ground? How is the situation of the Palestinians in the West Bank, in Eastern Jerusalem? So it's not an either or, but it's we should keep both sides of this discussion present.
Thank you, Ofer. Salvatore, I think your question on how we uphold our values in this context, or how we assess the public response to the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, I think has been kind of answered. But if this is not the case, please write again in the chat. And we will come back to that. But I do want to come now to the topic of, oh, sorry, there's another question that just came in and I didn't see it yet. It's a question on comments by high-ranking Israeli politicians, Yoav Gallant and General Ghassan Alian, in which the question is asked, Palestinians are being dehumanized, and the audience member is asking this question, why this is being translating in my head at the same time, why this is being reduced in the German debate to, well, not important. Max, can you say something about this, or generally how we talk in Germany, in the German public debate on borderline or dehumanizing comments by Israeli politicians?
So I'm not sure if the German media and the society and public and politicians and parliament is really silent about this quote. So on the last Friday of the plenary session week in the Bundestag, we had a debate about the current situation in Israel and Gaza. And my colleague Louise Amtsberg gave a speech to this topic for 8 minutes, and she quoted many politicians from Israel with their dehumanizing and unacceptable and racist approaches. So I think we do this. And I think it's also really important to quote these things and to be outspoken and loud about this fact. But I think what we are not doing in Germany and what a mistake of parts of the European discourse is to really demonize the whole state of Israel because of ministers who share far-right beliefs. And I think that is why we really have to separate who is civil society, who is the state of Israel, who are the loud and democratic voices of Israel, and who is a far-right government we do not want to support and we do not support. And I don't have the feeling that the German discourse does not quote it and does not report about it. But the thing is that we have a debate that is not like balanced and that has not a discourse which wants us to solve problems. We have a discourse where people want to have a situation like a soccer game. And if I read the comments sometimes, I'm shocked. I'm shocked about comments who criticize Israel as the ground of everything which is evil. And I'm shocked of comments who try to dehumanize Palestinians in the worst way you can imagine. And I think that we do not have the responsibility to just look at the others and what the others tell and how the discourse is and how the media is. I think we have to start on our own, on all of our own. And I think we have to start to really try to change the discourse. And that is the responsibility of all of us, to change this discourse and, for example, to quote what Hamas leaders said about Israel and what their goal towards Jewish life is, and also to quote at the same time what Israeli politicians say. And I think we do this. And please give me the opportunity, Yazgülü, to also respond to another thing, because I think it's very, very important to be clear on things. And I think that Christiane said that Germany stopped funding peace organizations in Israel. And this is not the case. Of course, there were investigations, and it was necessary to do these investigations, also to do these investigations to have really a good ground for peace organizations, for their support from Germany. And I can tell you that there are many things that Germany still does support, and where also the Greens in the government advocated there that we still supported. For example, Givata Viva, really an organization to promoting Jewish-Arab coexistence in Israel. It's very, very important. And there was also in December 2023 a big celebration for the 30 years of partnership with the state of Rhineland-Palatine and this organization. There is, for example, the Willy Brandt Center in Jerusalem. There are bridge scholarships from the DAAD. There are still things in the Palestinian territories like the youth intercol, like MICAM research visits. There are joint initiatives like the Wannsee for German-Israeli exchange. There are youth projects like the We Are Connected Special Funding 2024. And there are still projects where people are working with German funding. And I'm glad that this is the case. And can we do more? Yes, we can do more. But we do not reach more by telling that we don't do anything, because we do something on the ground. And German funding also supports still civil rights organizations and peace organizations, and that was something Greens advocated strongly for in the government. And that is what I beg you for as our party members, just to really try to look forward and try to what we can do, and not only to look at the past.
Max, let's continue because we have a question from Salvatore that has he asked to you, and he says, given our party's deep commitment to human rights and international law, how do you assess our current level of public response to the humanitarian crisis in Gaza? How do you believe we are doing enough to uphold our values in this context? He's talking about German politicians and political response here in Germany.
So I believe that we have a terrible discourse, and it's really, really bad to be part of this discourse. You know what happened after my last speech in the German parliament about the situation in Israel and Gaza, where I criticized Hamas at the one end and where I criticized the Israeli government on the other end? I got two shitstorms. I got one shitstorm that quoted me as a spokesperson of Hamas and their terrorist agenda. And I got another shitstorm that quoted to me to be responsible in general for the situation in Gaza. And I think that we as the party, and we as the strongest German human rights party by all of our tradition, we have to not only deal with this discourse, we have to change it. That is what our exercise is. There are other parties who can feel comfortable with using this discourse for their mobilization and for their party political agenda. But this is not our role as the German Green Party. The role of us as the German Green Party is to say that many things can be true at the same time, and that many goals can be right together at the same time, and that many goals are common goals, that there is a real goal to secure Israel's existence, and Israel's existence is under threat. But at the same time, our goal has to be that Palestinians deserve a life in dignity, that hostages have to be released, and that this war has to end. And what we should not do is to have a discourse and to do a discourse like some members, not all members, but like some members of the left party, where I really have the feeling that they sometimes treat the debate on the back of Jews in Germany. And I think there's also a huge threat when you look how anti-Semitism is increasing in our own country. We also have a human rights responsibility there. And as a human rights party, we can't give up this responsibility we have. And just let me be clear that I think that we really have to be critical on our own, because we should have made it clear much earlier that Netanyahu's conduct of the war is closely tied to the global shift to the right that supports him and his government, and that we should have confronted this even more assertively. Netanyahu has been waiting for Donald Trump to return power and give him free rein. And now the question is, what tools can the new German government use to push Netanyahu to make the release of the hostages a real priority, to halt his offenses, and to end the humanitarian blockade? And I think that when we ask these questions over months, and if we give substantial work in the parliament to these questions, and that we reach goals by our substantial work we do, and by the belief that many goals can be right at the same time, I think then we can also change the picture we as the German Green Party have in the public opinion about the situation in Israel and Gaza. But I think that goal should not be how we are treated in public opinion. A goal should be what we can achieve on the ground. And we have to achieve so many things on the ground that we should not care so much about the public discourse, maybe.
Thank you, Max. We do not have much more time left, so even though we started a bit later, I do think maybe we can just go a few minutes past nine, sorry. So if that's possible for you, I do want to come to the question of the current escalation with Iran. And Ofer, I want to ask you, and this is also a question that came in the chat, but the conflict with Iran, basically been simmering for decades, but it has currently escalated. Iran, the mullah regime, which has for decades called for the eradication of the Jewish state, of Jewish life in the region, and they have. Israel has now launched an attack on the Revolutionary Guard in Iran and on nuclear enrichment facilities, and Iran is counterattacking civilian targets in the cities, including in Tel Aviv, and many people are dying currently on both sides. And so the question to you would be, what are the newest developments on this escalation between Iran and Israel? And I think you already had this topic in a webinar, also with a Green member of the European Parliament 2 days ago. And since then, many things have been happening, including changes in international response to this situation, but also, of course, an escalation and many more deaths on both sides. What do you think are the newest developments, and how do you view actually the potential for a full-scale escalation and a full-on war between those two countries, and what it could mean for the Israeli people, for the Iranian people who have been mostly fighting against the mullah regime, but which are now basically between a rock and a hard place, in a very difficult situation on the ground. So my question to you would be, what are your views? What are your views on the current situation there, and what do you think Israel intends to do?
Well, first of all, thank you for your question. I really must underline that I'm no Iran expert. And unfortunately, the webinar 2 days ago where I should have taken part with Hannah Neumann's office, because of the ongoing attacks here in Israel, it was not possible. So Ofer Waldman from the Middle Eastern Referat of the Heinrich-Böll Foundation in Berlin did a brilliant job explaining the current situation. So, and I would also add that we're in a very early phase of this war with big question marks, still unclear what will be the regional repercussions, the regional involvement we see here to this war. And of course, I think the biggest question of them all is the United States going to join in the war, or does President Trump continue to strive for a diplomatic solution? And when I, referring to your last question you posed me regarding what is the support in Israel, for instance, or what is the Israeli response within the Israeli society to this war. So maybe I will start with this, that other than the war in Gaza, we see now the Israeli society rallying around this military campaign. It reminds in a way what happened when Israel conducted its strikes against Hezbollah in Lebanon in autumn of 2024. We see the Israeli army, the Air Force, and the secret services in a way re-establishing their reputation after their failure on October 7th, 2023. Iran is indeed perceived in the Israeli society as an existential threat. We should not forget that via the proxies of Iran, especially Hezbollah and the Houthi rebels from Yemen, that the Israeli population was almost daily under attack since October 2023, out of solidarity with the struggle of Hamas, with the attacks, the brutal attacks of Hamas against Israel in October 23. And different than the attacks from Lebanon or Yemen, the price is heavy. I actually live in the northern part of Israel, not far away from Haifa. Looking out of the window, I see the oil refineries of Israel, which were severely damaged. Actually, the Israeli oil refineries are not functional at this time because of the attacks from Iran. We also see the Weizmann Institute, one of the most important scientific centers of Israel, being severely damaged by Iranian attack. We see casualties. But when I look at polls within the Israeli population, the support of this campaign is very high. But one must say it is still not clear yet what exit strategy does the Israel government has to this war. There is a consensus among military experts that Israel cannot completely eradicate the nuclear program of Iran by itself, that it will need the assistance of the United States. And there is, of course, the open question. Israel is fighting now 5 fronts in Lebanon, Gaza, West Bank, Yemen, and Iran. How long can Israel sustain such a war, the longest war in its history, with the price for the Israeli economy as well? And again, the largest question, what will Trump do? What will the United States do? And maybe as well, you started when you introduced me that I live in Israel. You asked me if I live in Israel. I do, and it is scary. It is scary to run with your kids to the shelter, as I've done more than once and over the past few days. The Iranian rockets are different than the ones that we experienced from Hezbollah or Hamas in the past 1.5 years. And at the same time, when I talk to Iranian friends in Germany who have families in Tehran, in Isfahan, in other places, they tell me in Iran there are no sirens and there are no shelters. And I can just imagine how dire the situation there is. And I think it is important to look at the situation of the civil society there. The Palestinian poet Mahmoud Darwish reminds us, Fakar Bererak, think about the other. So think about the Iranian other as well. There are questions about why was this attack launched now. We can only guess. I mentioned the proxies of Iran, Hezbollah, the Syrian regime. Those are not functional anymore, allowing Israel a largest degree of freedom in conducting its military operations. I hear voices in Germany suggesting that this attack has maybe something to do with the inner political situation of Benjamin Netanyahu. I don't know. I think we can only guess in this question, but the mere fact that we considered it possible that there is an inner political consideration playing a role in launching this attack, which is a dramatic attack for Israel, shows the degree of distrust that we have in the international community and in Israel, in the current Israeli administration. And when you hear the voices from Iran right now, and I would pose maybe the question, would Israel attack Iran if Iran would already have a nuclear device? The answer is probably not. So we should ask ourselves, does this current attack push Iran over the threshold in order to secure the survival of the regime, the mullah regime that you have talked about, which also is a challenge for the Iranian population itself? Another question which is highly relevant, can Israel rely on the United States? We've seen up until the current administration that even those administrations, even the Democratic administrations under Clinton, under Biden, under Obama, which were criticizing Israel, still stood on the side of Israel when Israel was confronting Iran. We don't see that yet in such an extent from the current administration. We have a U.S. president which is in a way erratic, I would say. It is still not clear if Trump joins in. We hear in the last 48 hours voices that say maybe now that this is the Israeli military success, maybe he wants to jump in, but still nobody knows. And maybe a last point, which is highly relevant, especially for our discussion today, is the question, what is Germany doing? And I would like maybe to remind us of this famous picture during the Cuba missile crisis in the 60s. The necessity of a red phone, the necessity of an ability to communicate between the hostile parties, between Iran and Israel. And I think Germany, with its legitimacy as one of the strongest allies of Israel, and Germany as one of the strongest actors pushing to reach the JCPOA, the former nuclear agreement with Iran, Germany enjoys a high degree of legitimacy in both sides, on both parties. This role of Germany between Iran and Israel is highly crucial to avoid miscalculations, which often happen in these kind of conflicts. And looking at what the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz just said about Israel doing the dirty work, if I may quote, for the rest of the world, I do hope that Germany will maintain its role as a mid-man, as a mid-actor between both sides, in order to ensure that when the day will come, there will be the possibility to conduct a diplomatic conversation between both sides in order to end this war for the benefit of both sides.
Yes, thank you, Ofer. I would like to state here and take maybe this moment to say that the way the Chancellor formulated and posed the wording of Israel doing the dirty work is something that has reverberated across many communities here in Germany as something deeply disturbing. And I think we should acknowledge that this is for especially the many civilian deaths in Israel and in Iran currently, basically something atrocious, to say it like this.
And I would, sorry that I interrupt you, Yazgülü. I want to add another point, which is going almost unnoticed in Germany. Israel and Palestine, they are rather small countries. When the rockets that are aimed here in Haifa are being shot down from the sky, their debris is falling on the West Bank, their debris is falling on Jordan. We should not forget that those people, also the people living in Nablus, in Jenin, in Ramallah, are also suffering from this war. So it is not, we should not think that the population in the West Bank is not a part of the, is not suffering from this escalation between Israel and Iran. In Iran, I think it's an important point that we should bear in mind.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Hamza, I would like to pose the final question to you, because Ofer talked about the reasons for this current escalation. And of course, we can only speculate at this moment, and we do not know the path this will take or what will happen with US support or support from other countries. But there are some voices in Germany which are actually saying that this war has now escalated towards Iran because the Netanyahu government is trying to distract from the situation in Gaza, or has felt that international support is wavering, is reduced for the Netanyahu course in Gaza, but now is obviously with the attack on Iran strengthened again, this international support for him. By way, of course, this is an example with the German Chancellor, who just a few weeks ago criticized the Netanyahu course in Gaza, is now full on supporting his course in Iran. So the question would be, how do you view this? Is it a possibility, or is this something that is this being discussed in the Palestinian communities or in Gaza, that this is maybe a way to divert attention away in the German or in the public debate from the situation in Gaza? And how do we prevent this from happening? How do we prevent it that we do not talk about or see what is happening in Gaza with the focus on Iran at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, one of our guests said a few minutes ago that it's possible for many things to be true at the same time. And I'd like to guess that it's possible that this war was started as a distraction, or that it was used as a political survival when it comes to the Prime Minister Israeli Benjamin Netanyahu, or to be actually an actual intention to get rid of Iran nuclear facility capabilities. I would say that we cannot reach a certain answer for this question, but I would say that the three of them actually are happening right now. I mean, the German Chancellor say that Israel is doing the dirty work of the West, but he didn't say that the exact prime minister, and also other ministers or ex-ministers in his government are war criminals, and there was subpoenas on their names that they must be questioned for allegedly war crimes that was committed in Gaza. So we are talking about a war criminal government doing what dirty work, and for who? And what does the West want from such a government? We are talking about a government, as we were talking about the quotes, for example, Bezalel Smotrich, who said it's moral to starve 2 million Palestinians. You have Gallant, who said we are fighting human animals, and the list goes on with this government. So we must be careful when it comes to such statements, to give legitimacy and justification for war criminals who are actually using the law to avoid being held accountable. And unfortunately, the German government did not actually do enough when it comes to such a matter. And unfortunately, it's true about Gaza, the distraction that is happening, the entire focus not only of the Middle Easterns, but also of the Western community, has entirely shifted to the Iran-Israel escalation, and some of those officials unfortunately forgot the horrible crimes that this government committed in Gaza, and started to give it a sort of a legitimacy because it's fighting a terrorist regime. It's actually possible for two contradicting things to be true at the same time. And I'd like to think that both regimes are actually criminal, and we shouldn't go through this legitimization of such a government.
Max, very shortly, because we are way over time.
Yeah, please allow me to also be critical on the way Israel is attacking Iran. But I think there are many questions we can't answer in a webinar like this. There are still many questions which have to be answered at the United Nations and at the United Nations Security Council especially. And I believe that Israel have to prove that they believe that there is really a current threat from Iran, and the so existential current threat that they had to act. I just want to say that it is right to criticize Israel for this way of war, but we should also not forget that the worst threat for civilian life in Iran is the regime of Iran, and that we have to support a civil society, and that the West once already failed in supporting this civil society enough. And that is really an important human rights policy approach, that we really support with everything we can and we have the civil society of Iran in their struggle, like we should have supported the civil society of Gaza in their struggle against Hamas. And the way to support them is not the way of supporting any war games, but the way of support them in Iran, for example, would be to finally list the IRGC as a terrorist organization. I think this is something the West should be doing, to show that we are on the side of the Iranian civil society and that we believe that Iranians on their own will build up a future in freedom and democracy and also peace. Just imagine the brave young students of Iran, which find an Israel flag in front of the university, but they don't want to step down on it, and that is why they walk around it. Just imagine this. The people of Iran don't want war, they want peace, they want freedom, and they deserve our support in their struggle against their terrorist brutal regime.
Thank you. Those were some very important closing words. And let me thank all of you, Ofer, Hamza, and Max again for this very important discussion tonight. The audience, thank you for participating and also for keeping a very respectful discussion. I think it's something very important to continue doing this. And of course, this will not be the last time we talk about this issue. We have many different, I just mentioned this webinar on Monday by the European level, or European parliamentary, member of parliament. I'm sorry, keep switching to German in my head. So thank you again for your patience that we had to do this in English, and that you will now be able to view translated version on YouTube. I would like to close by saying that we have now heard, or there are some news on Hamza, on your current situation, on your situation in Germany. You fled to Germany in 2023 in August, and since then have been here as a refugee, and are now, I think, facing the threat of deportation to Greece. I heard this today because there is currently a petition going on to prevent this from happening, to keep you here, to keep you safe. And maybe would you like to say something on this, or do we just or do we just leave it at that? Maybe say some words on this, because I think this is very important, and I only heard about this today. And there was a question on this also in the chat, so I would like to take the opportunity to say something, for you to say something on this.
Yeah, so actually I left Gaza on August 2023, and I entered Germany by late February 2024, and I applied for asylum in Germany. I already applied an asylum in Greece, and I was granted this asylum, but I had to flee because I was chased by some radical groups there, and applied for another asylum in Germany. And I was shocked actually to receive the negative answer from the court after 1 year and 2 months actually waiting. a negative answer and a deportation order, despite the life experience, my activism in Germany, and how I started to be connected not only to politicians, but also to some institutions, some organizations that promote the coexistence and combat anti-Semitism and extremism. But the main priority for me was not all of this. The main priority for me was to start something as a democratic or a civil movement for the Gazan society from abroad, to have a better or a democratic Palestinian state as a first step. And yes, I received this negative answer, and I asked my lawyer to appeal. Unfortunately, they insisted on the deportation thing. And yes, unfortunately, this is the case. Thankfully, we managed to get the signatures for the petition, but I would say that the most important step would be right now is to lobby more or to pressure more on the Bamfin NRW, because at the end of the day, they are the organization with the power to make a consideration for my case and take another look at it, because I think it's a bit different from the typical asylum cases that comes from the Middle East. And yeah, that's it.
I put the question, I put the link to the petition in the chat. I'm not sure if everyone received it. Yes, thank you. And please sign this, and please let's make everything. Well, let's do everything to make sure that you can stay here. And I didn't know if you wanted to raise the issue, but I think it's important that we do. And so I hope it will be successful. So thank you again for everything, and I wish you all a very good evening, and hope that we can continue at some other point this discussion. Ofer, I wish you very much good luck for your new post, your new position in Tel Aviv. And
Thank you.
again, I hope you keep safe, and I hope you can continue your very important work on the ground. And the same goes for you, Hamza, for your activities in Germany. Max, thank you also, and also thank you to my employees who in the background have been working very hard for this webinar, and we are very happy that it could take place tonight.